Annyeong, it's Mikey here, and today I have a very exciting video that I'm going to be thanking Keybay for. So you guys would have heard about Keybay from my channel, from a lot of the switches that I've tried. So Keybay sent me a bunch of switches, I've made a bunch of videos, and to this day, my favorite switch right now is still the Keybay Blue Cheese V2. Now, they sent me out the base. So they actually still have some base stock left over, and they sent me out to try the full board and see what it's like. So this whole video is actually going to be everything that's available on Keybay's website, from keycaps, from the switches, to this board itself. So we're going to see what it's like, see what my thoughts are, and I've also heard from some of my viewers that they were curious how I'd fix certain things of the board that I noticed. So we're going to have to see what I do with that and what my suggestions might be. So please make sure to like and subscribe, and let's get right into it. So starting off with the unboxing of the Keybay base. Now we have to thank Keybay for sending me this out because I never got to try it beforehand, and luckily they were willing to send me out the board as well as switches, and I actually had some leftover keycaps which you'll actually be able to find on Keybay's website. Now the first thing you'll notice here is the plate, and the plate actually has some interesting parts to it which we'll look over later, and it is a PC plate, so it comes stock with a PC plate. Unfortunately, they didn't have any other plates available just because the base is quite old and they're no longer producing more parts for it. And then they give you a bunch of foam, so you have all the different foams you'll need, from like between the plate and the PCB to underneath to fill in the spots between the case and the PCB as well. Now the PCB is going to be also filled and kept inside this plastic bag, and one thing I noticed is that because of the way the PCB is done, so it's nice that they have this foam there to protect the PCB, but overall the PCB has a lot of these like extra outer sections, which is specifically because it's a mount for the PCB, so the PCB itself has mounts and it gets stuck on the plastic pieces, which really makes it tough to take it out. Now the PCB itself looks very nice, and I can see right there it's actually going to be with a ribbon cable, and you know that's just because a lot of times beforehand more boards were actually with a ribbon cable instead of doing like the magnetic connection. They also provide you like those dumbbell nubbins as well as screws, so you're going to need a screwdriver for this, and I'll show you guys later what it is, and also a USB dongle in there. And overall, I gotta love this case because it has so many different compartments available. So if you are someone who likes to carry their board for certain things, it's nice that they have compartments where you can carry many different accessories that's going to be useful with this board. Now taking a look, it does look really nice. I really like this color. It really does remind me of like a Gundam. Like that's kind of what I'm thinking about. And as you can see there, it's a very, very long ribbon cable, and we'll see later the reason why for it. Now these have these magnetic badges, so normally you're able to customize them. The only thing is that because there's no extra pieces, so I didn't get to try other badges. One thing cool I noticed is the top left area for the magnetic badge is actually a USB dongle holder. This is something that's really cool, and the reason why it's very cool is because you actually can hold the USB dongle with the keyboard, which a lot of custom DIY kits don't actually have that available. And I'm really appreciating the fact that they have this, because I actually am one that loves a keyboard that has that, because I don't like putting my USB dongles in random places because I could lose them or they could break. So this is really nice, the fact that they have this specific thing. It's a very creative way to do it, and the first time I've seen someone do that like that. Now the board does weigh 1.48 kilos, about 1.5 pretty much just the case itself, and we'll weigh it later once we've built the board. Overall, we're going to be using the plate and the PCB, and we're going to be doing a lot of different types of builds with this so that you can kind of hear like what you're getting. This is a 1.6 millimeter PCB and plate, non-flex cut, so we're going to measure it. As you can see here, it is 1.6, and so will the PCB, both non-flex cut. The reason why I'm a big fan of that is because it provides a much more crisp sound. So if you weren't aware and you were more into budget boards previously, the reason why people don't like the 1.2 flex cuts is because it provides a little bit more of like a thinner sound, and it's not the greatest sound to have. Luckily I had some Gateron stabilizers left over, so you have to use screw-in stabilizers for this, and you're going to want to use the ones that are for 1.6, so make sure you get 1.6 millimeter screw-in stabilizers for this. There's going to be like other versions out there, and you're going to want specifically this one. Now, as you can see here, I was mentioning before, it is PCB mounted in terms of like the gaskets or like the specific like dumbbell nubbins. So as you can see there, it's going to be like a plate on top, and then you'll have like the actual nubbins actually connected to the PCB, and they're very separate. So one thing I was checking when I was doing that was to see, was there going to be screws that are supposed to be made to like put on top of the plate and the PCB. Because older boards, there was a tend to be a situation where you have to actually screw the plate to the PCB, and it would actually give you that spacers so that it gives you the specific space to actually put in the switches in, and it wouldn't push in the plate too much. But this one is not like that at all. So I put in all of the like dumbbells into the PCB, and as we open up the case, you'll actually be able to see what it's going to be like. So this is going to be one of the hexagonal screwdrivers, so it's going to be one of the larger ones, like I would say actually medium, and it's only 4 screws, so you're going to be able to open it up from there. Now the screws is actually different size from the case closing, and then the screws that are actually used inside when we are mounting the plate, and I'll show you guys soon. So overall, when you open it up, you get the bottom casing, which looks really nice. Now the first build I'm going to be doing, just to give you guys an idea, is going to be a plateless build. I wanted to really see and hear what sound plateless, because the plate itself is actually screwed into the top case. So the top is going to be screwed in. So it's a top mounted case, or technically a top mounted plate. And then the PCB is actually going to be on the bottom. Very interesting how they did it this way. So it's the first time I'm actually trying a board like this, where the plate is the one that's mounted and the PCB is completely separate, and then the switches are keeping it both together. So we're going to go into, of course, building it up. First things I got to do as well is going to be put on the rubber, like the friction on the back of the case. So that's just to make it so that the board doesn't actually like slip around on top of your desk, and it really helps provide that grip that you need. So make sure you always do this, because otherwise, trust me, it's going to slip and slide everywhere on top of your mat. So before we go into doing the plateless build, we're going to have to do the stabilizers. So interesting thing about this board is it's not a 6.25 U spacebar. So that means that it's not like the smaller spacebar that you normally see on most boards. This is actually a 7U. So as you see there, that's a 6.25, and you see how short it is comparatively. And then we have the 7U. So the board for this one, you have to use a 7U spacebar for keycaps, and you also have to use a 7U stabilizer. Now I'm going to be using the BDZ, and I'm going to be using Krytox 205 to make the stabilizers in terms of the actual like stem and the wire for looping. So first I use the BDZ in terms of looping up the wire itself, and the reason why I use BDZ is it's a little bit thicker, and having something thicker for the wire is a little bit better, just because the wire is like a metal, and metal clinking around will actually provide like a tinging sound in terms of stabilizers, which is not a great sound. So it's best to loop it up as much as you can, and either you can use 205, which is usually, you know, what a lot of people use, but I just do like to use BDZ because it's a little bit thicker, and having something a bit thick is nice to provide that like dampening in terms of it inside of the actual stabilizer stem. Now I'm using Krytox 205. So Krytox 205 for the inside of the housing for the stem of the stabilizer, and on both sides we just lube it up there. You can do a decent amount, like compared to switches, you don't have to worry as much of putting like a little bit more, and I'll show you guys of course closer up once I'm done. So we're doing both sides of the spacebar stabilizers, and then we just get the 205 and just lube it up on the sides of the housing, which should help in terms of just the smooth movement of the stem. So as you can see here, that's completely lubed up, and you can see how like much lube is on there. Next we need to lube up the stem, and of course use the Krytox 205. You don't want to use something too thick because this needs to be smooth. So you put the sides, so I get all the sides of the stem, and then I'm also going to get the in between where the wire would be going through. I think just doing that section a little bit there with some lube helps with the movement for the wire, and it really provides that extra step for the actual lubing. Overall, you don't have to do it that way, but it just helps. And you can see comparatively, like that's with lubing and that's non-lube stem. So that's kind of how much lube I'm doing for the stems of the stabilizer. So I'll do the next one as well. And then let me go and show you guys how I put it in. So the next thing I'm going to do is put in the stem inside of the actual housing of the stabilizer, put in the wire, and then make sure I clip it in. So you have to ensure that the wire is clipped into the stabilizer. If it's not fully clipped in and going in, then you're going to have some issues with it sticking out, which is not good. So make sure you have that all put in correctly. And then after that, we're going to put it all together. So here you can see I just had a little bit of troubles with putting the wire actually through the stabilizer, just because of the shape of the stabilizer. It was a little bit tough to actually push through. I had to put a little bit more pressure into it. It's not going to be good to actually put too much pressure on the wire, because the wires can bend, and if you bend the wire, it's not going to be great. Now as you can see here, I just put it into the holes. So the big hole is going to be for where the actual stem of the stabilizer or the housing, there's going to be a little clip there. It clips into the bigger hole, and the smaller hole is going to be for the screws. And then you're just going to put it all in, push it down into the PCB, then get the screw and a screwdriver. Make sure you're holding down the housing of the stabilizer, and then screw it in, and then you should be all good for your stabilizers in terms of a screw and stabilizer for the PCB. So as you can see, that's all put together. Now I'm going to actually come together with the switches. So I'm going to be using two switches in this video. One's a Thoki switch and one's a Clacky switch. I'm going to start off with the Keybay Blue Cheese V2, and I'll also have the Cheese V2, and that's going to be for the Clacky. But in terms of the plateless, I'm only going to do the Blue Cheese, and that's just to test if the plateless will work. So we're going to put in the Blue Cheese switches inside the PCB, and again, no plate, so I have to make sure that the switches are fully in and they're not going to fall out. And then of course we're going to do a little bit of editing magic to get all the switches in, and then boom, here you can see I have the Blue Cheese V2s. Now the keycaps I'm going to be using is from Keytalk, and these are going to be the Turn2 90s keycap. So this is the keycap set that's also available on Keybay's website, which I'll link, and then we'll do the editing magic here. And then this is the overall full build of it all together with the Mecha Blue. I think it looked really nice and came out really well, but let me give you a sample of the plateless build. The next thing I'm going to be doing is going to be adding the plate. So we've given you a sound test with the plateless, and what my thoughts on it is that because it's plateless, there's going to be certain areas that gets actually really high pitched ping noise when the switches are being pressed down. I know this is just because I'm using a hot swap and I'm not soldering it in, so it's going to have some of that movement from the switches, which is making that pinging noise once it's hitting the actual PCB. So time to do a foamless sound test with both the Blue Cheese and the Clacky Cheese V2, and see how does that sound with this whole thing put together. So let's go right into the sound test. Now we've done the foamless sound test, we're going to have to move on to the foamed. So we're going to add all the foams, like every single foam that I have, into this build. What does that mean? So there's going to be the PE sheet, we're going to have the foam inside the prawn, and then we're going to have some extra foams on the bottom of the case as well. And we're going to put everything in and give you guys a sound test of both the Thocky and the clacky switches, and that way you can hire what's the difference between having the foam in and not having foam in altogether. So we've done all these different builds. Now, what is my thoughts? So I was thinking, like, what can I do to modify this board? Now, I don't want to add like tape mod to this thing because it's already got so much thock and so much like a dense foam sound when you are actually doing the build with pure all the foams inside. So a few things I wanted to do to modify this board was, one thing for sure is I think this board in terms of like pure plateless is difficult when you have the PC plate. The PC plate really does not make a good foamless sound, and it has a more of a hollowness and like this sound almost like if you're hitting wood that's hollowed, which is not the greatest sound I've heard so far. I mean, it's not bad. You can definitely do this without any foam, but I'm going to do this with just the PE sheet. Next thing I'm going to do is modify a little bit. So I noticed the spacebar is a 7U, so there's a lot more hollowness in the spacebar sounding. So what I'm doing is actually cutting the foam from the spacebar section of the foam and then adding it into the case itself. So I'm taping it onto the plate, which I think will help with the hollow sounding in terms of the spacebar. The next thing I want to do is fix the light bleed. So the section on the top right area of the keyboard actually has a bit of light bleeding. It's supposed to be for like the battery and things, and give you guys an idea if like you're charging the keyboard or not and how the battery life is. I think that light bleeds out, and I was told this by a viewer, so Nav was telling me that I needed to check it out because of the bleed. So my suggestion is going to be not spending more money in terms of modifying it. So what would be the best solution is using the foam that they actually provided. So they have a styrofoam that they actually provided in the case. So why not cut that up and cover up those areas? So that's what my thoughts were. And my solution is going to be cut it up and then cover those areas so that you have less of the light bleeding go through. To be fair, if you have a PC plate, the light bleeding is going to be worse. Then you have aluminum plate where the aluminum is going to cover that light a little bit, and the PC actually has the light shining through to every piece. And you can still see the light bleeding there, so it helped by doing the bottom a little bit, but I realized the bottom is not going to be all lit. So I actually came back to this a little bit later, even though it's fully built. And after I fully built it, I kind of realized the fact is that the top case is actually connected to the PCB, the plate, and the plate itself, the above portion where the keycaps are and the switches are, is actually also going to be bleeding a lot of light. So my idea was to actually cover that area too. So that means I have to take it all apart again. While I'm taking it apart, as you saw, like the ribbon cable actually came apart, which was not great. And I'm actually going to open up fully to show you guys how to put the ribbon cable back in and also check out the backside. So we're going to grab that styrofoam again, cut it up, and actually cover the sides. So I also used some of the like car foam, so like the car sound dampening foam, and it's like a tape. So actually I'm typing up the sides to also cover up more lighting, and then on top of that using the styrofoam. Now by using the tape and then having the styrofoam cut up to cover that area, I'm hoping that it will help at least a little bit in terms of covering up that bleed through. And then as you can see here, just opening with the bottom case, we're taking all apart, and you can see on the bottom it has the 2 batteries inside as well. So the weight comes off, and like the base logo comes off. And then the batteries is going to be 2000 milliampere hour batteries, so a total 4000, which is really a small battery size for a board like this. And now taking a look after it's all together, there's still a little bit of bleed through unfortunately, but it does help a little bit. Now let's do the modded sound test. So we got the board right here. Now, unfortunately, certain keycaps weren't available for the website, and I was wanted to try the KeyTalk Rainbow with this one, but instead, I actually was kind of curious to see what would work, and I tried the Smile to 90s, or Back to 90s, sorry. Now, this one is actually one of my favorite keycap sets from KeyTalk in general. I really do love what they did with this. It's a really nice design. And overall, this board too, I gotta admit that Keybay did a great job. Now, this is interesting because this is a 7U spacebar. Normally, I don't use a 7U spacebar. I'm actually more used to the 6.25. This was really cool. It actually been really cool though if it was able to be split. I think that would have been really awesome. If you're already putting the space for this one, cool to have a 7U split and have like a split spacebar would have been awesome. Overall though, I think they did a really nice job making a 75% keyboard. I'm really curious what their next thing's gonna be though, because I know they're coming up with a new one very soon. I do not really like this one. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a big fan of like having this the keys here and like the 75% kind of built this way. It's a very interesting way of doing a 75% that I'm not personally used to, but doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. You do get like all these keys available to you, which you would have available on a TKL. So even though it's 75%, you're getting the extra keys that you would for a TKL, which is pretty cool. Overall, I'm really appreciating what they did with it. I do wish that there was more plates available. It would have been really cool if I had like a aluminum plate to be able to do like a nice super foamless build. Unfortunately, with the PC, doing foamless is a little bit iffy with the sound. It gets very hollow. But we're gonna go in a little bit more, show you guys like a little bit closer look, like in-depth look, and like the software via and everything like that. And of course, compare this with maybe some of the other 75% boards that I've tried that were like DIY kits. So let's go right into that. So going in to take a look at the board and my thoughts on it. So overall, the build in total weight after building it, everything is going to be almost 2 kilograms. Like that is not a light board, but it also has a really dense feeling. The thing is though, it doesn't feel that heavy in your hands. That means that the board is very well balanced in terms of the weight. So as you could hear there from the pinging testing from the case, it does have a bit of that ping. The aluminum does feel nice, but you still get that pinging sound from the case. Now, I really do appreciate the fact that the USB dongle portion is there. One thing I am not a huge fan of is the a wireless switch going to be on the PCB, and you actually have to remove the caps lock to do so and turn it on. So that's a little bit unfortunate, and I just wish that that's just something, my personal wish, right? I'm a big fan of not having a switch there and being able to easily access it, but the fact is, like, when you turn it on, it's okay to keep, and it should go to sleep, and then you won't have issues with the battery like losing charge over time. But it's just my own personal thing. Now, the actual magnet on the top right also has those little holes in there, so it provides you the lighting there, and it's just an extra little feature. You don't really get any lighting anywhere else except for like the QWER for changes the different modes. But overall, it's not the worst to have like no lighting. So though, if you do like backlighting, just keep in mind that this board will not have that available. Overall, with the foam sound, it gets really dense, and you get a ton of dense foam sounding, and makes the clacky switches actually sound a lot more clacky. Even the PE sheet mod really on its own already makes it super thocky. Overall, the sound wise, it is quite loud. So just keep in mind that if you use a clacky switch like the Cheese V2 or any other clacky switch, it's going to be on the loud side for boards. And as you saw, like the 75 decibels, it's definitely going to be on the loud side. Like I used it at the office, and definitely people were saying that, yeah, it was a bit loud. I do really appreciate the design though. It is interesting, right? So you do get like the whole delete, insert, page up, home, and all those buttons to the right. And that's something that usually 75% boards do not have. This is usually going to be like a TKL to get all those buttons. So this is a very interesting way to do that layout. Some people are going to enjoy that. Some people will not. I found that for me personally, for 75%, I like it without all those buttons, but having them actually kind of felt useful. Like when I was doing some work, I realized I was actually using some of the buttons and realized that, yeah, it is interesting to have all these kind of available to the side. It's just getting used to the distance and making sure that you don't accidentally press certain keys, because the way that it's shaped, you kind of put your hands in a different area and thinking that's a little bit wider like a TKL. But overall, I did appreciate it. I think in terms of the ribbon cable, I wasn't a huge fan of it being on the bottom area. I think the cable could have been shorter, and then the actual connection for the PCB to be on the upper side. But overall, the top mounting is a very interesting design. I think overall, by doing the top mounting, it provides you a very different sound profile than, say, most other boards would. I really don't think you need to have the bottom foam in the board at all if you are getting this board. I think if you do like a thoughtgate sound and stuff, I would remove the bottom foam completely. Like having bottom foam will actually make it too foamy, and it's going to sound a lot nicer without the bottom case foam. And even if that's too much foam, I would remove everything and just the PE sheet. And honestly, if you want to have a nice clacky sound, just remove the PE sheet completely. Like having the PE sheet actually will make it sound too thocky instead of clacky. Now, of course, I do want to go into the website and give you guys the pricing and a little bit more information with like the switches and keycaps. So going to the website, you can see here it's $245 Canadian. So that's the price in Canadian, not USD. You do have different colors, so they still have some stock left. So you can see here, it tells you how many items are left for each one. So you still have some different colors. Mine is a special edition mech blue. There's gray, there's cream, there's like flash black, flash white, pink. So there's still some left that you can definitely go and grab yourself. As you can see here, they do have the badge links and the extra parts, but unfortunately they're completely sold out. You could reach out to them and they possibly might have some, but yeah, unfortunately those things are completely gone. Now, you can also reach out to them to have different color matches, which is awesome. So they allow you to customize it a little bit, which is really cool. You can reach out to their email. This thing, as you can see, the 7U, the 1.6 non-flex cut, awesome. It's VIA available, and unfortunately the battery size is a little bit smaller, but to be fair, when you're using a custom board like this, you're going to be using it most likely wired. I personally do all the time. Now, to get the VIA software, you're actually going to have to join the Discord, and it's going to be in a section of the Discord that says documents. You can click on the link and you'll be able to download like all the things that you'll need for the base. And one thing I forgot to show earlier was just like the switches and keycaps are also all available on Keybay's website, which I'll link in the description for you guys to check out for yourself. So you just have to download the JSON file, open up VIA, go into design, load, make sure you move the JSON file into the folders where you keep all of them, open it up, and then bam, you can have a full access to the VIA for the space. And as you can see, it's designed perfectly to match the base, which is awesome. You can also change that lighting on the top right there in the backlighting section. This doesn't mean that your keyboard has backlighting, so it's not a backlit keyboard, but you get that section on the top right. VIA is awesome to use, and I love the fact that they have a VIA available, because VIA just has a lot more customization available. So if you're a newbie, you can do just the basic stuff, but if you are someone that isn't actually more experienced, you can use it to do different things. Like, as you can see, I personally like to have different VIA capabilities with it for like layers, and I like to have my FN on the bottom right, so I changed that in the VIA file. And then of course the next thing we're going to have to do is test out the polling rate. So this thing is still going to have 1,000 polling rate, which is going to mean that you can still use it for gaming. So I did use it for gaming. It's completely fine. You don't need to have AK for games at all. It's just nice to have, but it's not a necessary thing. Now I want to show you guys a little bit of comparison compared to, like, say, some other boards that are available that are DIY kits, especially for those that are kind of curious, like what other 75% could I look at. Now the Zoom 75, right, is one. It's an older like board, but I think the Zoom 75 was a really good one. Honestly, I think this was much better than the Zoom 75 Tiga. It is pricier. It's 209 USD, so it's going to be a more expensive board, but it does have screws in it, and it's going to be, ribbon cabled and everything, just like the, base. The Tiga is actually a quick release, so it's a bit easier to build. Very good for beginners. But overall, I'm not a big fan of the board itself. I think the way that it was done in terms of sound and such is just not what I like, especially with the design. I'm not a big fan of how the design came out to be. And especially the prongs for like the volume on the toggle by the arrow keys wasn't the greatest either. It's a little bit iffy. Now the ND75 is more of a budget option. So it's a budget 75% DIY kit that you can use, and it's definitely okay, but you don't really get the nice like plateless sound tests that you can do with the 1.6. It's just not as great as the base. That's my honest opinion. I think the screen is a little bit gimmicky, and it's not the highest quality screen. So overall, the ND75 is going to be good for like a thocky build for people if you're doing like a full foamed and you want to save a little bit of money and go in a budget build. But I think the base is actually a very, very good build for a 75%. Especially if you are wanting to really upgrade your own self in terms of doing DIY kits. As you saw, like the Turn to 90s keycap set is available on Keybay's website. The Blue Cheese V2 is currently out of stock, but they're going to be doing another batch, and it's an amazing thocky switch. Like, it's my favorite thocky switch, and the Cheese V2 is actually a very, very good clacky switch. As you can see there, they did an amazing job with these switches, and I think in terms of like what you can get for good price as well, you're looking at Keybay switches to being one of the top ones you can do. And you can see here, I actually changed the price to USD for you, and it's 180 USD. So it's cheaper than the Zooms, and yes, it's pricier than the ND75, but it's going to be a higher quality board overall. So if you are wanting to have like a nice 75% that has like the extra keys on the side that you might be missing from other 75%, and you're wanting to upgrade yourself in terms of building keyboards and going to the hobby, definitely you should go check out the base. Final thoughts on this is that Keybay is doing some really cool stuff with the boards. I'm actually quite impressed with what they've done. It looks like they put a lot of work into it. Something I really appreciate is the amount of work that was put in. A few things that I probably would have loved to see is just like having a little bit of a different option in terms of maybe closing this off with like a magnetic connector in here, or even just having the spacebar a bit split would have been really cool. I think the spacebar in general, as I was like showing in the video, has too much of a bit of like a hollow sound comparatively to the rest of the board, and I think it could have been nice to have just like a split just to help with that in general, having less of that like hollowiness and the like wooden sound kind of feel. I will have the links in the description for you guys, so I'll have the links in the description for you guys. You can go check it out for yourselves. They still have some left, which would be a decent pickup for you guys. And of course, they have the switches and the keycaps all there, so I'll link it all for you guys. Go check them out. Go check out the other videos I got, and I'll have to catch you guys next time.